Hey, what's up, YouTubes? This is Saibrock. I've been doing a lot of videos about D&D 5th Edition, but given that we don't have any more information, there's really nothing more for me to say. So I thought I'd do a little switch up and do a video that I had looked for on YouTube and I couldn't find, which is a review of the Star Trek The Next Generation deck building game from Bandai. I'll start off with an overview of gameplay, and then I'll talk about the specific things that I like and dislike and what I think of the game overall. And before I begin, let me apologize for the quality of the video and the camera angles. I'm doing all my recording off of the webcam that's integrated into my laptop, so I can do nothing about the video quality, and the angle is limited to what I can put my computer on. Each player will begin the game with one starship. The beginning starships are totally unimpressive. They have no bonuses to 3 of their 4 stats: speed, attack, and diplomacy, and their defense, 8, is the lowest among any ships in the game. However, they can be enhanced by other cards that you play when needed. You begin the game with a deck of 10 cards consisting of 3 ensigns, 2 lieutenants, and 5 other starter cards: evasive maneuvers, phasers, tricorder, Starfleet Academy, and a diagnostics check. That's your starting deck, and it's not especially good, although a few cards in here are handy throughout the game, such as Starfleet Academy, diagnostics check. Once you've learned how to use them, they can be very handy throughout the game. However, for the most part, you're going to be upgrading these cards to better things and using them to buy better cards out of the Stardock. And that's basically how a deck building game works if you're not familiar. You spend the game adding cards to your deck and sometimes getting rid of cards that you don't want in order to make your deck powerful enough to deal with the challenges and the scenarios that are thrown at you. The game has 3 basic scenarios. There's exploration, which is the main scenario, and it's all players for themselves, where you attempt to complete missions for victory points, and the first player to 400 victory points wins. There's the Klingon Civil War scenario, which is a game scenario for teams, where you are attempting to vie for control of the Arbiter, which is Jean-Luc Picard, in order to gain control of the Empire. And then there's the Borg scenario, which is an all-players cooperative scenario where you play against the Borg deck in an attempt to survive and eventually defeat Locutus. I've only played the exploration and the Borg scenarios so far. I haven't had a chance to play the Klingon Civil War scenario, though I am very much looking forward to it. I'll start by explaining the exploration scenario, which is the basic scenario, and the other 2 are modifications of that. The game's going to start out something like this. You'll have the Stardock deck, the Space deck, ensigns, lieutenants, and commanders, any that aren't used in your starting hands, and 9 cards from the Stardock deck. Now, these 9 cards, plus these piles of ensigns, lieutenants, and commanders, are called the Stardock, and that's where you buy cards over the course of the game to add to your deck. The Space deck is where you find missions, events, and other starships that you can attempt to solve or attempt to fight or add to your fleet. Let me talk about a few of the different types of cards in the Stardock. The most common type of card is a character card, such as Kargan here. Kargan has 2 speed and 3 attack, as you can see on his stats line. He has no special abilities, which would be listed in this white box here. His affiliation is Klingon, which can matter for some things, and his cost is 6. That means it costs a player 6 XP to buy him from the Stardock. You get XP by playing from your hand lieutenants for 2 XP apiece, or ensigns for 1 XP apiece. On your turn, you can buy as many different cards as you wish, as long as you can pay for them with XP. So, for instance, if you played 2 lieutenants and 2 ensigns, you would have 6 XP and could buy Kargan and add him to your deck. He would go straight to your discard pile, and you would be able to use him the next time he is shuffled into your deck and drawn. More often, characters have special abilities that occur when you play them. For instance, Tomalak says, you may discard 1 character with a cost of 5 or less from one opponent's bridge. The bridge is where you play your cards to. All cards that you play go to your bridge. So if I had my 2 lieutenants and 3 ensigns on my bridge, and another player played Tomalak during a war, he could force me to discard one of my lieutenants, and it would go to my discard pile, and I would not be able to use him. Any effects that he's had so far would already occur, and they cannot be undone. But he can allow me to lose the +1 speed that lieutenants have. Another type of card is the maneuver, such as transporters. Transporters are valued for its ability, although it does have +2 speed and can be useful for that in a crunch. The transporter special ability says move 1 character from your discard area to your hand, which can be very useful if you've discarded a character that you need now. The third type of card is the setup, such as system improvements. Setups do not have stats. They are played to your bridge, but do not affect your ship's stats in any way. This setup, system improvements, says trash up to 2 cards from your discard area. That would allow you to take cards from your discard area and remove them from your deck entirely so that they don't come up again. You would use this to get rid of undesirable cards, such as ensigns, or in the Borg scenario, get rid of Borg cards in order to help you last longer. It's also possible to upgrade cards instead of buying them. For instance, every player starts with a Starfleet Academy, which allows you to upgrade 1 character from your hand or bridge to a character from the starbase, costing up to 2 more. Conveniently, ensigns, lieutenants, and commanders are costed in increments of 2, so you're always able to upgrade one to the next, as long as there are some remaining. You can also upgrade them for characters from the Star Dock. Every scenario uses the same starbase deck, with the same cards and the same 3 basic characters. However, what differentiates the scenarios is the space deck. In the exploration scenario, the space deck contains events and missions. Missions can be attempted in order to gain victory points. Events simply happen to you, and if you can overcome them, you get the victory points. The space deck also contains neutral ships, which you can encounter and either fight or attempt to gain on your side, to replace your very bad starting flagship. On each turn, you have 1 Explore, which you can use to turn over the top card of the space deck. This is Skin of Evil. It's a mission card. All mission cards have the flip effect in this red box here that says you gain +1 Explore. That's because it takes 1 Explorer to flip over the mission card and another Explorer to actually attempt it, to meet its goals and gain its reward if you succeed. So you're always able to flip a mission card and solve it the same turn. If you cannot, it stays face up for other players to solve if they can. Each mission has a goal, usually ship stats such as speed or attack. Sometimes missions cost XP, or to have an undamaged flagship or a certain number of basic characters in your bridge. In any event, during your turn, you can attempt to meet the goal by spending 1 Explore, and if you succeed, you gain the mission's victory points, which are added to your points area, and you gain whatever reward it says under reward. Very simple. Some missions have ongoing effects while they're in the mission zone. In addition to missions, there are events, such as this meteor storm. Events have their effects as soon as they're flipped over. You don't need to attempt them with an additional Explore. If you meet the goal, you add its points to your victory area. If you fail to meet the goal, you take whatever failure conditions it says. For example, Meteor Shower says, fail, your flagship receives 8 damage. Then move this card to the bottom of the space deck. 8 damage is a lot. It's enough to destroy one of the starting ships outright. Some events start a war, such as this war event, which is the basic one and has no special conditions. When a war is begun, each player plays cards to their bridge and attempts to destroy each other. The winner of the war is the player with the highest ship stats at the end of the war who hasn't been defeated. So if one player has a lot more stats than the other players, players may gang up on that player in order to make sure that he does not win the war by having higher stats. In addition to missions and events, the space deck may also contain neutral ships, such as this Bird of Prey. This is a very low-level ship, being worth only 25 victory points. It also has very poor stats. However, you'll notice that they are all better than the one that you start out with. When a ship is flipped over from the space deck, you immediately go into combat with it. If your ship, along with all the stat modifiers from your bridge, is faster than that ship, you may attempt to use diplomacy to win it over to your side, either adding its victory points to your area or actually becoming your new flagship. If you can't use diplomacy to get it, such as if you don't have any diplomacy, you may also fight it, comparing its speed and attack versus your speed and attack and dealing damage to each other. Each ship takes one shot at the other, and if you can't destroy the ship, it's turned face down and put at the bottom of the space deck. Some ships are more powerful, being worth up to 75 points, like ships like the Enterprise. However, they are very difficult to get on your side or to defeat in battle. They're very tough, very powerful. So defeating ships or gaining them on your side, completing missions, and overcoming events are all ways to get victory points, or mission points as the game calls them. First player to 400 in the exploration scenario wins. In the Borg scenario, the space deck is replaced by the Borg space deck, which contains several Borg cubes, very powerful ships that all players must face, and which get more powerful based on the number of cubes you've already defeated and how many times the players have failed in their attempts in the past. There are also cards which give players Borg cards. Borg cards are these special cards that go into your hand, but they can't be played. They simply add to the strength of every cube that you encounter while you have this in your hand. Additionally, if any player has 5 Borg cards in his hand at the same time, that player is eliminated from the game and assimilated by the collective. The object of the Borg scenario is to find and defeat Locutus, who operates very much like an event. When he is flipped over, instead of having the normal ship combat, he has his flip effect, which causes each player to gain Borg cards in their hands, and then he works exactly like an event. You have to meet his goal of 6 plus X speed and 10 plus X attack, where X is the number of Borg cards at each player's hand. And the thing about Locutus is that he has to be done using only characters. Maneuvers and ships don't count. That makes it extremely difficult to defeat him. So that's the game in a nutshell. There's obviously a lot of rules I haven't touched on, but that's a basic overview. If you like deck building games, I bet you'll like this game. It seems to combine a lot of the best elements of several other deck building games from what I've read. You might notice the size of the box. The contents of the box are a total of 5 20-sided dice for tracking damage on your ships, and about 300 cards. Obviously, the box is way too big. It might make you think that you're getting more than you are. However, the rationale behind that is that you have a lot of room for expansions. I'll touch on that later. So I'll start out telling you what I like about it, what I don't like about it. First off, and this is very important to me, the Star Trek feel is very strong. I really feel like I'm playing a Star Trek game. And for a big Trekkie like me, and by the way, I'm a huge Trekkie, that's very important. However, I've played with a lot of people who aren't Trekkies, who aren't really into the theme, and they found the theme easy enough to ignore. You don't have to be a Trekkie to enjoy it, but I find it very enjoyable that it is Star Trek themed, and it does feel very Star Trekky. Additionally, the Borg scenario does good cooperation. It really encourages players to work together and to join forces against the Borg. The Borg feel very intimidating, which is excellent. I was worried that the Borg would be too much of a pushover. But 3 players, we got crushed. 2 players, we got crushed. 5 players, the game lasted hours before we finally were on a downward slope to defeat. We probably weren't going to win that game, although we might have pulled it off. But we learned a lot of lessons for when we played it next time, and so I think we will do better next time. Additionally, there's a lot of avenues for strategy, not just one road for victory. I, for example, went for an early economy build last time we played this in the exploration scenario. I immediately didn't do anything except try to get better and better economy cards, commanders, lieutenants, get rid of all my ensigns. And that gave me a certain economy monopoly later in the game, where other people couldn't get commander cards because I had them all. Other avenues of strategy involve cards that recur cards from your discard pile, such as transporters or cards that allow you to draw several cards all at once, so that you can go through your entire deck every turn and get the exact cards that you want. Uh, I find the depth of strategy very appealing. The Borg scenario, and I assume the Klingon scenario as well, feel just as well integrated as the standard exploration scenario. And this was something that concerned me when I was reading through the rules, and it seemed like it was going to be the same basic game with a little add-on. And it's not like that at all. The space deck makes the game what it is. Instead of completing missions, you're fighting the Borg, and the Borg are huge and intimidating. So there was a very big different feel between the Borg and the exploration scenarios, and I'm willing to assume, without having played it, that the Klingon scenario is much the same way. Now what I don't like about the game. The playtime is much longer than advertised. On the box it says 60 to 90 minutes. The shortest game that I've had was about 90 minutes, and it was when we got stomped by the Borg. The Borg don't scale well with fewer players. You need four or five players at least to fight the Borg, and that's the maximum number of players for the game. It's just impossible to muster up the numbers that you need with fewer players early in the game, and if you fail against the Borg, you start getting assimilated and it gets harder. One of my biggest gripes about this game is the loads of typos, misprints, and miscellaneous errors throughout the game. For instance, the group that I play with, we get a hoot out of this card, Shields, which is shields with the I and the E mixed up. It's a very unprofessional mistake, and it should have gone through some sort of editing process before being printed. Additionally, there's a few characters that have a box for shields, but don't actually have a shields rating, which it turns out was a misprint, and they are not supposed to have a shields rating. The book, the instruction manual, is very unhelpful for learning how to play. It's decent as a reference guide for when you need to look up a question about the gameplay, but really you can't learn the game from the instruction manual. You have to find online tutorials, which are pretty competent at teaching you the game if you're playing right along with them. The production value basically is not worth the price of admission. It comes with 5 20-sided dice and about 300 cards. The box actually is the nicest part about the game. Don't get me wrong, the cards are very nice quality, they look nice, they feel nice, but it's just not worth it for the $40 retail price. One of my own ideas about how games with lots of players, more than about 3, are supposed to work is that players should be doing things even when it's not their turn. In this game, players don't have anything to do when it's not their turn unless a war breaks out. Or in the Borg scenario, players share a turn. But in the exploration scenario, if you have 5 players, you're basically waiting through 4 players' turns before you get your turn. And you're doing nothing. You can't really strategize about what you're going to buy or what you're going to do because that might all change. The entire star dock is open for everyone to buy things from, so half the cards might not even be there by the time your turn comes around. My group has decided that it's too hard to trash cards. Decks get large and inconsistent because it's very difficult and very costly to get rid of cards unless you buy cards specifically to get rid of other cards, which is a self-defeating strategy. We're coming up with house rules in order to fix that problem, but it should be in the rules. You should have more control over your decks. So that's what I think about the game. Despite all my problems with it, I would still give it an 8 out of 10 rating. It's just a dang fun game, despite its problems. And I'm, as a huge Star Trek fan, obviously the theme is really helping me out that score. So if you're not a Trekkie, you'll probably think of it more as a 6 or 7 out of 10. It's kind of an average deck building game with nothing really special going for it. But as a Trekkie, I love this game, and I will be playing it a lot in the future. One thing that I would like to say, and this is a big complaint to Bandai, there are other editions of the game. There's the next phase, and I believe the Enterprise edition is either out now or coming out soon. They are marketed as expansions, but there actually is no rules in their books for combining those sets with this one. They are entirely separate standalone games marketed as expansions, and that makes me very angry because I bought the next phase, and after looking at the rulebook in a PDF form, I had to take it back because I didn't want another game just like this one. So be cautious of that. If you want to have different scenarios, because the next phase comes with a second Borg scenario, which is slightly different cards where you're fighting the Borg Queen instead of Locutus. It has character cards that represent, I suppose, from a different part of the series. So you'd have characters that are more developed. And it has, instead of the Klingon scenario, it has the Romulan Underground, the reunification scenario. If fans of the series might recognize that from the reunification two-part episode with Spock. So if you're into that, and if you would rather see that than the Klingon Civil War, then get the next phase. Don't bother getting this one because it's the exact same engine and has all the same cards that you need to play. So that's my review of the Star Trek deck building game. And I enjoyed it. I hope you do too. Even though I really don't feel it's worth the price of admission, if you can find it used for, I'd say $20, $25, maybe even $30 if you're a big Trekkie like me, that'd be totally worth it. So this was my first review for Saibrock's Nerd Hub. Let me know what you guys think, if you'd like to see more of them, if there's any particular nerdy kinds of games that you'd like to see reviews of, if I did a good job, what you liked, what you didn't like, whatever. All the comments are appreciated. I decided I'd start out with this game because it's a deck-building game with a Star Trek theme, and there's really nothing nerdier than that, and I love Star Trek. How I mentioned that. So yeah, leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe, whatever you want to do, and let me know what you think.